Hey, hey, hey. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. Listen, I am so glad y'all here. I feel so rested and relaxed. I've had 2 weeks off and I spent 4 days, was that right? 4 days in Coahoma County, Mississippi. And while we were there, we took a little over an hour drive to see the musical, The Color Purple. And I, like many people, remember seeing the original um, Steven Spielberg rendition in the 80s. I have read the book, but I've forgotten much of what the book had in it. But I was looking forward to reading it again. So I have bought myself a little hard copy, honey, because one thing that stands out to me is that when people are upset, even with the movie that came out in the 80s, and then the relationship between Miss Celie and Suge in the musical, it's interesting because as a child, a preteen, one thing that stood out to me the most was Miss Suge Avery, honey. Um, she was getting it in, and she was getting it in with everybody in the book. And the Alice Walker, who is also lesbian, who wrote the book, if you didn't know that, it was very colorful in the way that she talked about the relationship between Miss Celie and Suge as they explored their relationship with their sexual relationship with each other. Um, the kind of content that would definitely made me um, turn red and a little bashful. And so I think it's interesting that when people are critiquing the current work, that that's one of the primary things that they talk about, as if um, relationships between people have shifted over time. And what I think is more true, or is as true, is that what's more likely is that people are being more open about their relationships, but people have been writing about these things forever. And just as a sidebar, if you have not seen Rustin on Netflix, I mean, listen, 10 out of 10, Coleman Domingo, 8, he 4 times tooted, he 4 plus 4 he ate up that role playing Bayard Rustin. And for the people who often want to quote the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In the I Have a Dream speech, it is important to know that that entire March on Washington would not have happened had it not been for the very openly and gay friend of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Bayard Rustin. So I think it's important to watch that movie. And I also think that we should have, and I'm talking about me too, because honey, you want to talk about an area where I lose my patience. It is when people are being hurtful and harmful to LGBTQ people, um, because I just think it's just not even necessary. Gay folk been around us forever, and to watch The Color Purple, and then that is the thing that stands out to you is astonishing, considering that the opening of the movie is a 14-year-old girl being raped by the man she thinks is her father. Not once, um, but twice. And the result of those rapes was 2 children being born that he stole from her. So that is not what is upsetting the people. What is upsetting is the relationship between Suge and Miss Celie being portrayed on screen. I think it's interesting that what happened to Miss Sophia when she gets um, beaten in jail for saying that her kid is not going to work for a white woman in town, forcefully saying it. She tried to be nice at first, and then she said it forcefully, and for her to be beaten and jailed for that, that is 6 years, I think, and that's not the thing that gets people upset, but it is the relationship between Miss Celie and Suge that does. And I just think that there's space. And y'all, tell me, give me your thoughts. I think there's space for us to acknowledge that the struggles that all marginalized people have to deal with are connected. And it is a distraction for us to be talking about anything else. I even think that part of what's happening right now, where we're distracted with what's going on with Bishop Jakes, is just that, a distraction. We have an election year next year. And I was sitting in church on Sunday, the day before I went to go see The Color Purple, and beautiful sermon, and just woefully disappointed in this line: it does not matter who is in the White House, because we are in God's house. And I understand what people are trying to say when they say things like that. And when you say it does not matter who is in political position, what you are signaling to people is that voting does not matter. And you might not realize that, but that's exactly what you're saying if you say it doesn't matter who is in the White House. And I would argue that in the state of Mississippi, the closing of almost all of the rural hospitals, because they could not expand Medicaid, or was critically important and directly tied to people who were specifically in positions to block that. And we just have to be really careful when we are in powerful positions, especially those where people think we are closer to God, in terms of like how we talk about things specifically as voting. And speaking of how we talk about things, I know that Taraji P. Henson has been getting a lot of notoriety for speaking about the disparity in pay for Black women in Hollywood. And many people are like, well, Monique said that before her, and Viola Davis said that before her. Listen, it is to be celebrated when people start to listen to the truth. And it is often that we don't move based on the first thing that someone says. I know I grew up thinking that the Model T was the first car and that it was created in 1908. And the truth of the matter is, the Model T was not the first car. The first car was created by the Mercedes-Benz people in Germany in like 1885, like almost 20 years, a little over 20 years before the Model T was created. When you think about, most notably here in the United States, when we talk about the end of bus segregation in the South, most people know that Rosa Parks, um, 40 years old at the time, sat down and refused to give up her seat on the bus. And many folks go, well, Claudette Colvin, she sat down first, and that was over a year before Rosa Parks, and they didn't pick her because she wasn't light skinned, because she was an unwed mother, and because she had, her hair wasn't straight. Yes, and 100 years before both of them, Elizabeth Jennings, whose dad owns the patent for the dry cleaning business, I can't think of his name, but she desegregated transportation in New York City 100 years before. There's most of the time, the when an invention of any kind, even if it's the first of a civil rights act, or the first of a car being invented, or the first of a light bulb, what we usually know about is not the first. Somebody else says it or does it, and then someone else picks up on it. It's like there are no new ideas, just expression of ideas. Um, and so I think there's space for us to be able to, when the movement starts and people are picking up on it, let us join in the movement instead of saying, well, you ain't the one who said it first. What are we doing here? But I hope that after this particular musical movie, I don't know anybody who didn't know it wasn't a musical, even though I heard there was a lot of scurry around that. I think that the primary thing is, while the original Color Purple movie got a lot of nominations, it did not win any awards. And I was happy to see Whoopi Goldberg do a little appearance. I was surprised by seeing Sierra in there. Did y'all know Sierra was going to be in the movie? I did not know. I was so excited, so happy about that when I saw her, and she made a really good Nettie, I think. But the greatest story around empathy from The Color Purple for me is this idea that each of us is better than the worst thing we've ever done, in the words of Brian Stevenson from Just Mercy, because by the time that movie was over, especially in the first version with Danny Glover, I absolutely hated Albert Mister, like, whatever his last name was, and Coleman Domingo, who played by Rustin in Rustin, which I think you should watch, is Mister in, this particular version, and I just think he did a masterful job of making me because I just saw by Rustin. I saw Rustin on Netflix, and he did a masterful job of making me hate him in this particular movie. But what I loved about the new version is that they give you some insight into how beautiful people don't just happen. It wasn't like Missy Lee left and then he just had a change of heart. He had a lot of negative or bad things that happened to him in the book and then also in this recreation. And sometimes, I've spoken about this as a result of my DNA discovery. Sometimes crushing events are the only things that will make people more empathetic. Um, like, I believe I was a lot of things before my DNA discovery. I believe that I was considerate. I believe that I was nice. I believe I was helpful. But empathetic, I'm not sure you would. In fact, I was everything but empathetic. A lot of the times I was indifferent, which last week I talked about how they, or the week before last, I talked about how that got me in trouble, or how that still gets me in trouble. I'm talking about that in therapy today, by the way. Um, but when you see what he ultimately ends up doing, it is a story of redemption. And it was an empathy building experience for me to believe that people can and will change. It does not mean that I have to agree. It does not mean that you have to reconcile. But I believe that people get another opportunity, sometimes maybe not with you, but with someone else. And if we could be open about the transformation of what happens on screen, if we can get into the feelings of all of the characters and just imagine what it must be like, I think we could even get our heads around the idea that everybody just wants to be loved. And when we don't show up in loving ways, there's probably some really good reasons, some stories, some excuses, some things that happen to us. I know that I learned that as part of my DNA journey. And if we get excited about these transformation stories on screen, my hope is that we can get excited about these transformation stories in real life. Um, what I don't want you to think is that I'm suggesting that we embrace and support and don't put barriers and boundaries around people who have not gotten there yet. In fact, that's what empathy should require us to do. There's a historical figure that I always think about, and that's Bull O'Connor. And I cannot imagine people going, "Oh yeah, let's empathize with Bull O'Connor when he's like, sicking dogs and fire hoses on children." Um, what I am saying is that if we could employ the same mental energy that some of the most hateful people in the world have the ability to employ, and that is they understand people well. They know how to move and manipulate people. And while it's used for bad, it is basically the definition of empathizing. It is understanding that no matter how ridiculous something seems to you, that it makes total sense to someone else. And so I am advocating that people who do have an emotional center, that do have a moral core, that who are motivated by community would try to understand people so well that we know that everybody doesn't respond in the way that we do, and therefore, that there are some people for whom we need to give more grace and mercy, and other people who need incredible boundaries because of that. I think the musical is worth watching. I love the changes that they made. I thought, while I laughed and cried and was angry and felt the full range of human emotion, I feel like they did a better job of filling in a little bit of the color to make it I don't know, just more palatable. Now, is there the issue of the negative depiction of Black people? Um, yeah, I think so. And I also know that this story that I saw on screen is a story that many people are still living today. For the reasons that I started this Filter Free Friday. we are more upset about people being gay than we are about domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and trauma. And until such time, there will be people who are going to tell these stories because telling stories helps to release and relieve and help people to know that they're not alone and that there's some redemption on the other side. So I think you should watch it. I think we should also advocate for the full range of the Black experience so that people are not being stuck. And speaking of the full range of the Black experience, one of my Jewish friends this week sent a whole long email to one of the city offices, and I'm gonna try to keep people protected here. Um, nicely, very nicely complaining because he thought that they had mixed up the menorah and the I can't even say it, Hanukkah. One is the seven candle Jewish symbol, and the other one has like eight candles or nine, I think. And he thought that they had mixed them up on their display, and actually, one of them was the Kwanzaa symbol. And so they gently corrected him and let him know that he was wrong, loud and wrong. But he shared that story with me, including the email. So I have the receipt, but I'm not going to embarrass him in this way. But I just think that all of these things go to say that I was blessed by being at the Color Purple on Christmas Day with my family. We had to drive an hour to get to over an hour to get to a cinema where it was showing. And it was just a delightful drive down because I was asleep, and it was a delightful movie because I was rested, and it was a delightful drive back because I was asleep. As if any of you know, it was we went to go see it at 7, so I was super, super tired. But I think the thing that I have stretched the most this year is just my learning and growing in full belief that empathy, while it might not be the panacea to change all of the hateful, harmful things that are happening in the world, I think that if on a personal level we can try to be more empathetic in how we deal with people, if in those areas where we have leadership, like as parents, as leaders in church, leaders at work, leaders in our community, if we could start to try to push a more empathetic environment. And I believe that laws don't make themselves. That where we find policy, practices, and laws that lack empathy, don't center people, that we have to advocate for changing those. And that has been the biggest thing that has shifted for me in 2024, 2023, and I'm taking that into 2024. Many of you who might know that I did an additional vision board party for 2023. And so, therefore, for 2024, the vision board party is tonight at Friendship Baptist Church at 6 p.m. All my people are welcome, regardless of your faith tradition and also regardless of your age. So, expect that there will be no additional vision board party in January because this is the one I'm doing tonight. If you can't make it, I am so sorry. Feel free to reach out and let me know if you need some help. Um, but as we read, as we watch movies, as we walk through these fictional worlds, fiction is one of the best ways to learn more empathy. But we have to allow ourselves to get into the spirit of the character for that to work. And you can get into the spirit of the character if you are sitting in a position to say that they are just wrong. Um, and if you're going to do that, make sure you're doing that for people who are causing harm to other people. And who somebody else love ain't harming you, baby. But I can guarantee you, if we are not moved negatively by racist acts like what we saw happen to Miss Sophia, by unconscionable acts that have happened to Miss Seeley in that movie, it is a testament that we are where the work must happen. It's Filter Free Friday, y'all. We got plenty work to do.